As the arteries of our globalized economy, the maritime domains from the Baltic to the South China Sea are vital. Here, Europe's commitment to naval excellence is key to our collective strategy of winning. Amid escalating competition, our state-level adversaries invest heavily in naval power, employing both traditional buildups and asymmetric strategies. To counter these moves, Europe strengthens its naval forces and deepens cooperative ties, safeguarding sea lanes and critical infrastructure. This united front is vital in maintaining stability and security. Today's panel will delve into how Europe's naval strategy plays a crucial role in this broader alliance, ensuring our seas remain free and our economies thrive.
Okay, thank you, and it's very good to be here today in Warsaw. I notice the icon of the conference today is, of course, the strategic arc, and an arc is a ship or a boat, and it has a nautical theme. And of course, arcs are very important for protecting people and animals from floods and deluges. But as the citizen of a sea power state, what I really like is warships. Warships allow you to project power and influence around the world. Now, the sea and the naval domain is often invisible. Even in countries such as my own, island states, the sea is often invisible. People live largely in towns and cities, and they are oblivious to what happens beyond their shores. Humans, after all, are land animals. But the sea has been central to wars throughout history, not least during the Second World War. Of course, many people saw the land and air battles. They also saw the activities of the home front, including the huge industrial enterprise to provide the munitions of war. But the sea was important. It was important in providing the UK with military material from North America. But it was also important to the Soviet Union. The Arctic convoys provided a vast amount of military equipment that was used in the Soviet war effort. Vladimir Putin likes to remind us how important the Soviets were to winning the Second World War, but he often forgets to remind everyone that up to a half of the tanks that were used by the Soviet forces in the Battle of Moscow were actually from the UK. So sea power is central to victory in war. It's also central to winning and upholding the peace. So today's panel, Safeguarding the Seas, Making the Navy Great Again, will try to delve into some of these issues. I have a number of questions I'd like to ask the panel. The first one looks at the general theme of maritime power. I think without a shadow of doubt, the two greatest powers of the modern era have been the UK and the United States. What has defined them as great powers, perhaps more than anything else, even their science and technology, is their ability to project naval power over the surface of the Earth. So my first question today is, what is so important about naval power, and why do great maritime states tend to win wars and shape the subsequent peace more effectively than their terrestrial rivals? And I'd like to put this question first to Andrew.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting me and inviting me to this very important conference. And full disclosure, in my previous life, I was professor at the U.S. Naval War College in Newport. And one of the key lessons I took away from that was that the United States is a quintessentially maritime power. Those Americans in the audience who may remember politically incorrect maps from high school where our hemisphere was in the middle, Eurasia was chopped up. These maps have disappeared from our high schools, but they used to be there. That gives you a very clear insight to what the U.S. really is. We're a continental island. We are essentially uniquely blessed by the fact that we live in a uniquely secure neighborhood that allowed the country to grow from 13 subsistence farming colonies into a power that transformed and took over the entire continent, established regional hegemony in our hemisphere, and then projected power across the Atlantic and the Pacific, so that when you look at where the U.S. deployments are today, both in the Pacific and the Atlantic, and you just kind of draw circles around it, that will give you a sense of how vital the maritime domain is to American security, prosperity, to our homeland security. And it augments this kind of very unique extremely secure, unusually secure for a European neighborhood that America lives in. If you look at the map, a lot of dangerous Canadians to the north, very dangerous people. Mexico to the south, a lot of water east and west. So that's the first point. The second point, this is also recognized in our Constitution. It states that Congress shall provide and maintain a Navy. Too bad, Army guys, it will only raise an Army. So there is a clear sense that the Founding Fathers understood how critical that maritime domain was to our prosperity and security. And I'm bringing this up to make the following point. On the previous panel, you heard a lot about the discussion about prioritizing Asia, pivoting to Asia, a very unfortunate concept because it flies in the face of some of the fundamentals of American geostrategy. First of all, when I think it was either President Obama or Secretary Clinton in 2012 that first brought the concept of pivoting, and that developed an industry over time, if you will. And it's largely a conversation about resources. It's a conversation about how much we spend on our defense, what's the tonnage of our Navy, what's the size of the active and reserve components. All these things are in the mix. But this is largely a political conversation domestically, and it's very important at this time when we're entering into an election. But the reality is that great powers like America don't pivot because our neighborhood is global. And our prosperity and our security depends on being able to have secure sea lanes of communication, which without the U.S. Navy would have not made globalization possible. The last 3 decades, where you have this massive shipping of components and resources, none of that would have been, you wouldn't have been able to write insurance on those transports without America guaranteeing security of those sea lanes of communications. Secondly, 70% of our Navy is already in the Pacific. And the reason why is because what we face there is essentially a long-range fight. It's a very different theater than what you see in Europe. And I'm speaking in those terms just to underscore that because we're in Central Europe, we're looking at a quintessentially land conflict right now. We tend to forget that, about how America projects power, how it operates globally, and why both the Atlantic and the Pacific are critical. This is not an either-or proposition, and I have this running argument with Bridge Colby, whose name was raised here before. This is a together with. If we lose our credibility in the Atlantic, we'll lose it in the Pacific and vice versa.
Can I?
Yes, of course.
When I heard the first time that there will be a panel, Make the Navy Great Again, I said, what? We are great, come on. There's no one else who is such fantastic as a naval. But then, you know, I'm an academic teacher in the previous life as my counterpart. And I was thinking, what create a sea power? It is capability to create control, to use the force for their own purpose. But I was reading also very old Polish definition from 1934, when one of the Polish greatest admiral was saying that sea national interest does not lie only on the sand. The sand is not the clue. It is the place, it is the state that everywhere where the national interest requires the Navy. So the Navy is crucial for all country. Just remember that 78% of nation, this is coastal nation, that 70% of trade, it is sea trade. That we need a Navy, and of course, we need a Navy in each place, in each, well, we should say, the global ocean. But we need a naval which is which have capability to work and to operate in each region when our interest will go with that Navy.
Thank you. How about from a Taiwanese or Indo-Pacific perspective? Why are navies still so important?
Okay. The first thing I want to share is about when we say the sea power, but another word is command sea power. especially in this time. I always should say, yes, today I think a lot of people, all of you maybe will be interested about in this morning, PLA have the big exercise to Taiwan. So today is my first time to come to the Warsaw, but in the morning I wake up because a lot of media ask me about that. But that is a very, very good case study about when we discuss about sea power. Because in the Navy, that is totally different like other service. It's not like the rocket force. It's not like the Army or Air Force. The Navy, he can to driving and showing a nation or one country his the attitude. Especially, we call that, as we know, that's the Navy diplomacy. Especially in this time, mainland China, they will be not want to destroy the Taiwan, but he will be using his ship driving near Taiwan to give the Taiwan, maybe they call the punish, or they will be showing the flag to talking to other country, maybe like the Japan or in the South China Sea, in the Philippines. He want to showing the flag, let other country to know he can handle this area. And especially in this time, we also will be saying that is the gumbo diplomacy. He direct to say, okay, mainland China, maybe they will be not like the new president, his speech. So he will be doing something. So in this time, from the starts from the World War I, World War II, okay, Cuba, and until now, Navy, that is a very important port or a very important communicates fleet or communicate the case to showing one country's attitude. So I will be thinking when we discuss about the Navy, great again. Maybe sometimes not only for the fight, especially more the missions is about diplomacy.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the Navy. The Naval was created to be a ship ambassador. They create the embassy, they create the diplomacy abroad. But to be honest, we talked today morning that there was big event on the Taiwan, but the same situation we have on the Baltic. 2 days ago, Russian statement that they will change our border in the Finska Bay. So it was, of course, connected with the big exercise of the fleet. But you know, this kind of statement not build a very stable situation on our region. Because it's impossible to change the border just like that due to the Sea Law Convention. But just, you know, put this kind of statement into the world, create the situation when all governments just, you know, move and ask question what's going on, how they want to change the border. And the same situation is the morning from Taiwan.
Yes, there's definitely a predisposition of authoritarian states, the revisionist powers, to challenge the maritime order at sea, whether that's in the South China Sea or around areas of the Black Sea, or indeed now we see most recently even in the Baltic, which many people thought only a few years ago was one of the most secure and peaceful seas of the world. Let's turn a little and think about technology, because technology has the propensity to change the relevant power of the sea powers. And there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about the obsolescence of navies, given the implementation of new technologies such as remotely piloted aircraft, colloquially known as drones, as well as ever cheaper ballistic and cruise missiles. These technologies have certainly challenged the Royal Navy and the US Navy in the Red Sea since the Houthis began to attack shipping in December last year. Ukraine has also used such technologies to overcome Russia's naval dominance in the Black Sea. Consequently, some strategic analysts have gone so far as to argue that these technologies will render certain vessels, particularly aircraft carriers, obsolete, just as air power ended the reign of the all-big gun battleship. At the same time, new ship-based technologies such as the Dragon-fired direct energy weapon system and Arsenal ships or missile rafts promise to reduce the threat from drones and inexpensive missiles, or to increase the striking power of Western fleets. So my next question is, how do you think new technologies will change naval warfare over the next 20 years? And what will this mean for maritime strategy? Perhaps we can turn back to Andrew.
So I'll take a slightly old-fashioned look at this. And I think one of the lessons we've learned that over looking at the battlefield in Ukraine and what's happening now in the Indo-Pacific, the Chinese are building their ships at speed and scale numerically, actually, not in terms of tonnage or capabilities, but numerically you could say it's now the largest Navy in terms of how many units they can field. We have staffing problems at our end. So in terms of capabilities, the U.S. Navy, in my view, is unquestionably the most powerful Navy in the world. But I'm going to underscore something different. That's our fascination with technology to a point that we believe technology can solve the numerical problems of mass. And that's unfortunately the mindset in how we build our weapons and how we approach our procurement system. The Air Force in the U.S. has always been the service that prized precision and range and technology. American Army historically was actually about mass. It was the concept of a citizen soldier army that was raised in the event of a crisis. But as it began to contract during the post-Cold War era, I joke sometimes, it acquired an Air Force mindset and started talking again in terms of long-range precisions, drones, and the rest of it. And I am not being a Luddite here trying to dismiss it. It has place. But even the most capable ship cannot be in two places at the same time. So the notion of having sufficient scale, redundancies in the system. I was last year at the annual U.S. Navy League conference, Sea, Air, and Space in Maryland, where for the first time the conversation was about the fact that our logistics will be threatened, that there will be missiles flying at those ships and at those planes. Remember that for 3 decades, we actually fought what I call scheduled wars. We could determine how much ordnance we needed, the troop strength. We had completely uncontested logistics unless we sailed somewhere around, near Iran. All of that is going out the window. We need speed, we need scale, and we need redundancies in the system. And that goes for our Navy. I would argue numerically we're too small. We have 2 new aircraft carriers under construction. There's talk about 5 more. I don't see the aircraft carrier as an obsolete platform because it's part of a network system. You also have to remember that the U.S. Navy has about 3,700 aircraft, in addition to combat vessels. And then you have sensors, and then you have networks and the rest of it. So it's a system of systems. But I keep coming back to the fact that somewhere in the beginning of that post-Cold War peace dividend and transition, we lost sight of what we will need in numerical terms. I was recently at a conference where U.S. Transcom was looking at what it needs to do, and the Navy will be a part of that, just to supply the 2 theaters, to protect these sea lanes, to make sure that logistics work, and if they're under threat, that we have to assume a certain element of loss because of the kind of near-peer competitor we'll be confronting. So when I hear let's make the Navy great again, we have a very technologically sophisticated, capable Navy. But that Navy needs to grow just like our Army needs to grow. I will remind you, our authorized NDAA strength now for the entire force, the joint force, is 1.3 million. Nowhere during the Cold War did we have fewer than 2 million personnel in our forces. We're now spending at 3.2% of GDP. If you look at the cost, the inflation in weapons procurement, we're probably at about 2.7, 2.8 in terms of the actual purchasing power of what we have. Height of the Vietnam War, we had a force of 3.5 million. We're spending close to 10% on defense. Average during the Cold War was 5.6 for the U.S. So we are ourselves having this conversation about, yes, technology can get us up to a point. But if we do not invest in rebuilding the numbers, we may not be up to the task, and technology will only take us so far.
Yeah, I will be opposite to Andrew. I will be modern. Last year, European Defence Agency created so-called future tellers gremium for the future tellers work. I was one of the future tellers, and I was working with EDA how to create the naval great again. What will be the future of the Navy? And this is a lot of idea, from the circulating ammunition, from the drone platform, from the, in my opinion, very important thing, cooperation between drones and helicopters. Multi-domain operation works. Moreover, there is also new idea which use Ukrainian fleet. It is called Mosquitoes fleet. So using fast boats to fight with the Russian fleet. There is also increasing the idea to increasing reconnaissance distance up to 300 kilometers. There is also an idea to evaluation of drone to create the drones capable to use more deadly devices. There is the idea to learn the system with AI, like machine learning AI. There is the idea of it's called tactical conscious. There is the with artificial intelligence, but in the end there is a human. So you can create all you want, but in the end there is the operator. And I'm in the opinion that we should save the best people, because we don't have as much people as we want to. So in the end of the process, there's the human being, the operator, the soldier, and we need to create the new soldier with the capability to operate in multi-domain battlefield.
Yeah. Yes, and in my view, I think technology, yes, that is very important, but not number one, not the first. The first is it depends on your strategy, especially the country, your geography strategy. For example, okay, Taiwan, we are just an island, so we need to keep our slack. So we need to our fleet. But for some country, maybe they will be don't need to too much focus on the navy. And another view we can try looking, it will be, for example, Taiwan. In Taiwan's navy, we don't need the aircraft carrier because we don't need to become the blue navy. We know blue navy, green navy, yellows in the navy. So sometimes in Taiwan, we are just to keep our slack will be more safely. And then another, we will be defend the PLA navy when they closing our island, closing our land. So sometimes for my view, the first is not the technology. The first is your strategy. Especially, it depends on your geography strategy and defining and the design, and finally you will find your strategy to follow you what kinds of technology you need to. And another is organization. For example, because the ship is expensive from Taiwan, we need a F-16 or a submarine first, or we need an M1 tank. Sometimes it will be your geography strategy, and it will be designing the organization and what kinds of acumen you need to buy in the first. And finally, I will be follow you saying the human capital. The battle still back to the sailor officer. So sometimes if you have maybe you have the technology, but you still need a human to writing or to using that weapon. So in that times, technology is important, but that not is the first things. That is my view.
Yeah, we create the strategy. All nations create the strategy. Poland has a maritime strategy. European Union has a maritime strategy. In my point of view, it's also very important to sometimes updating this document because, the strategy is not given one for, an era. You need the updating document because the situation is changing, and I agree with Andrew that the sum of fleet like UK is growing up very fast. Your idea to build 48 new ship is like incredible idea, and I know that you have agreement of your parliament for building it. And the same in Italian. Marina Militare is building perfect fleet right now. But we need to remember that, each country realize their strategy.
Okay.
Could I just add one point to this? Because it's very important about technology not to just talk about the technical aspect of it without looking actually at what is currently happening, especially the Sino-Russian alliance that has formed, and also the North Koreans and Iranians, but especially the Sino-Russian alliance, since we're talking about the Navy. So because of the last 3 decades, the Russians, using post-Soviet designs and with access to Western technology, have made some significant advances in some area. Attack submarine propulsion, for example, much quieter than they used to be. I remember talking to a senior flag officer who said, when I was a young lieutenant, I could track them with one sub and they had no idea I was behind them. Right now, I have to use surface, underwater, satellites and whatnot. And so I said, okay, what about the Chinese subs? And he started laughing. He said, they're like buckets of nails. And my point is that just because China can manufacture at speed and scale a lot of consumer goods, it doesn't mean that it can design and build state-of-the-art weapon systems. However, as Russia becomes more and more dependent on China, that technological aspect, I think, will be the prize China will be seeking. It will try to leapfrog into that area. And the second thing is, I think on the previous panel, one of the speakers said that, we don't need to decouple from China. I beg to differ. Because if we continue to allow the Chinese unfettered access to our R&D base, our universities, allow them to direct commission research, we're basically training their future weapons designers, and we're having the kind of technological bleed that allows them to improve their naval capabilities exponentially. And last point, if you look at what happened when Iran attacked Israel, we were very successful defending Israel, but we shot millions of ordnance, of very sophisticated, expensive weapons at 5,000 apiece drone that was flying in that direction. This whole model is unsustainable in my view. So again, our fascination with technology and technological edge has to be weighed against our ability to produce at speed and scale, or else when the Russians, even to use the European example, when the Russians park a wall of old tanks, steel, on Europe's border and start driving, every tank will take a javelin, a round, or whatever. If you run out and they keep driving, it's over. So my point is we need to rethink how we apply technology, especially in the maritime domain, but also on land. And we, in effect, need to have a serious conversation with our premier defense and space contractors about what they need to do. We only have 5 today, major defense and space contractors in the U.S., not because they didn't want to get the business, but because one administration after another said, no more big orders, just-in-time deliveries, efficiencies, the Cold War has ended, peace dividend, and as some panelists here said, Europeans, for the most part, use their defense spending as piggy bank for social programs. And the net result today is that most of the Europeans are incapable of deploying, operating, even at the most basic level.
China in the last 5 years built fleet so incredible. It's like 5 times France fleet, as I could remember.
Yes, we'll come on to China in a moment. I've got an explicit question about that. So if we could just hold that one. What I would like to actually dwell on for a moment, given that the idea of maritime strategy has come up, is the role of sea power in the context of the NATO alliance. So last week at the first Sea Lords, that's a very good title, Sea Power Conference in London, one participant explained with some certainty, I might add, that NATO's principal purpose is to defend its most exposed allies from attacks by Russia from land and air. But this is not entirely how NATO's first Secretary-General, Lord Ismay, saw it, nor was it the view of NATO's intellectual godfather, Sir Alfred Mackinder. In 1943, writing in the Journal of Foreign Affairs, he called for the creation of a Midland Ocean alliance once the Third Reich had been defeated. He thought that such an alliance, backed by the awesome maritime strength of North America and the British Isles, would smother permanently the geopolitics which had plagued continental Europe for so many years. This begs the question, who is right? Is NATO primarily a maritime or a terrestrial alliance? How important is the sea to NATO, from the blue waters of the North Atlantic to the peripheral seas, including the Baltic, Black and the Mediterranean seas? And what can NATO allies do to strengthen the alliance's maritime posture? I might ask Donata to answer that.
Yeah, NATO is a maritime alliance, it is no doubt. There is lots of exercise in the Navy field. I will say as practical user of the exercise, what's going on. We have dynamic mongoose. We have one of the oldest exercise on Baltops. The exercise which are connecting all nation. Just you have to remember that, for example, Baltic is not the same sea for us as for the Russian. And I don't agree that Baltic fleet is dead. It's not right, and I never agree that the Russian fleet is dying. Last year, in the defense meeting in India, they offer, to the India fleet the engine for their submarines. They are still growing up, and they are still very, very dangerous. I think that the cooperation between NATO and European Union and the exercise which we are doing all the time on different kind of seas, like 2 weeks ago on the Mediterranean, there was a big exercise, Mare Aperto, with connection with 2 missions. Don't remember the Aspides mission and the Atalanta, which we have also in that region. It keeps going. A very good cooperation. Of course, it is the question, is cooperation effective, or maybe it's too much and we not touching the most important things. For example, there is no such cooperation better than in Baltic. Baltic region is unique. And the cooperation in the Baltic region is amazing. We have everything. We have even the church cooperation, the cyclist cooperation. We have even photographic cooperation. And we have Baltic island cooperation. And, there is, in one of my articles, I was asking what's more we need. Because we have everything, and not, if we have everything, it means that maybe it's not working very good. So to start the cooperation, for example, to create a forum, Baltic Black Sea Forum, to create a new form of dialogue which can, for example, help Ukrainian. Because all forums which are Ukrainians, the Russian also are in. So maybe we should find a way to start another cooperation with the Ukrainian fleet, and to start another talk on the cooperation with the NATO.
Those are definitely some very interesting ideas, and connecting the Baltic to the Black Sea more explicitly, I think, is one of the kind of premier issues of the age. Maybe we can think a little bit about Indo-Pacific experiences here. What can Europeans learn from those, particularly in relation to resisting Chinese pressure in the South China Sea? Ying-Yu, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the first I want to follow you saying, I think yes, the NATO, the Navy come through the Pacific to fighting with China. That is very hard. That is impossible. But in this times, I will be saying we need to the military cooperation. No matter in the South China Sea or the cross straits, sometimes maybe like the UK, their aircraft carry driving near the Taiwan, or the France, you're the ship, Germany, you're the ship driving through the past the cross strait. That's already like before I say showing the flag. It will be let the mainland China will be more understand this area is international. So it will be, I will not say deterrence, but it will be showing the power to warning the mainland China, don't do it too much. And the second is a military cooperation. I want to show you one case. Like recently, Russia, they will be a lot of them joint exercise with PLA Navy. What they are learning, because we know the Ukraine don't too much the fleet fighting with the Russia fleet. So the Ukraine have to attack from the land to attack the sea, to the sea, using the missile, using the UAV to control that. That is also will be happening when PLA want to attack Taiwan. So Taiwan, we buy the Habong from American. We also have the Xiongfeng missile. When the PLA Navy driving near that, maybe in Taiwan, when we are under attack, we will be, our radar, our C4 ISR will be cannot work. So we will be get the American signal to handle or control or manage our missile to attack PLA. That is PLA, they will be learning from the experience, learning the experience from Russia. So in this time, that is mean in Taiwan, we should, or we can do the more cooperation with the, not only the NATO country, the other country, especially not only the Navy tactical. For example, the Taiwan recently, we will be doing by ourselves the new submarine. That is a lot of technology. Maybe we can do more cooperation. It will be keep the Taiwan more security.
Thank you. Those are some very interesting ideas. I'd like to turn now to the Indo-Pacific explicitly. So over the last 10 years, well, at least since 2015, China has added 72 new warships and submarines to its fleet. That's comparable to 734,000 tons of combined displacement. To put this into perspective, it's comparable to almost 3 French navies or almost 1 Royal Navy, and they've done it in less than 10 years. Not since the Soviet naval buildup of the 1970s or Germany's construction of the High Seas Fleet before the Great War has a systemic competitor generated such a force in such a short period of time. While China's naval expansion has now slowed down a little, only 100,000, still considerable tons of new displacement of warships and submarines has been added since 2022. The People's Liberation Army Navy, as it's called, is gradually evolving into a blue water navy, backed by the largest marine industrial base on Earth. I'll put it to the panel. What is China seeking to achieve with this fleet? What does it mean for us here in the Euro-Atlantic? And what can we do, i.e., as Europeans, what can we do to respond to China's maritime ambitions? I'd like to put the question first to Andrew.
Thank you. Well, in a nutshell, what the Chinese are doing right now is they're trying to establish regional hegemony in the Indo-Pacific. They're no different in that than any other great powers that it industrializes, rises, becomes geostrategically assertive. I am not as overawed with the numbers because, numbers is one thing. The ability to operate, geography, how those crews are trained, what they're capable of doing, how networked they are. This is all a very complex problem set. The advantage the Chinese have, especially vis-a-vis threatening, vis-a-vis Taiwan, is that they plan to operate close to shore. They're not at this point, in my view, nowhere near to be able to challenge, the United States on high seas. The problem is we have the tyranny of distance. I mean, if you look at how far we have to project and where we have to deploy, that's a pretty complex problem set for us. So the Chinese have this advantage that they're operating close to shore. And the biggest question, of course, to me is, would there be not just the capability, but also a determination on the part, not just of the United States, but also of our allies and partners to respond in the event of such a challenge. And just to touch on the question, is NATO an Atlantic alliance, or is it, look, if a Chinese or North Korean missile hits Hawaii, right, doesn't that make it immediately a problem set for NATO? NATO invoked the Article 5 on September 12th for the first time. Why? In defense of the United States. So to me, these are kind of academic conversations. I cannot imagine that European allies of the United States, that America helped to protect and defend with its forces, its nuclear umbrella. For 75 years, we're going to be having a big shindig in Washington very soon celebrating that Europe could sit it out and say, well, that's not our fight. We're really here to deal with the Ruskies. Impossible. The American public, the U.S. Congress, and quite frankly, I think the European body politic would not tolerate that. The People's Liberation Army Navy is growing. Numerically, if you look at the Chinese forces, they're already bigger than what we field. But again, this is not a battle-tested force. This is not a country that has been actually running multi-domain operations on a regular basis. I will put more faith in my British colleagues in terms of what they can do on water than I would put on what the Chinese can do. And the largest question to me, whether deterrence holds or doesn't, if Taiwan remains free or not, will rest on the politics of it all. Because deterrence is not just about capabilities. It's about demonstrating the willpower to use capabilities in a crisis. I would submit to you in 2015 when the Turks shot down the Russian jet, I think the Ruskies got the message. You know, Erdogan is not going to be fooled with. When the Russians dump fuel on our drone in international airspace and we nearly crash and don't shoot that son of a you-know-what, that sends a message, right? So we have a lot of politics to work through. And one final comment, the Indo-Pacific theater and the Asian theater in general is very, very different from what we're used to in the Atlantic. You know, in Europe, you have a network of interlocking, highly bureaucratized, often very ineffective, creaking, groaning, but existing structures. The environment you have in the Indo-Pacific and in Asia in general is much more traditional, you know, security guarantees, balance of power, mutuality of obligation, this kind of stuff. And I will tell you that the United States, both in Europe and in Asia, in my view, will find a way to skin a cat. We will work with the allies that want to work with us, that are real contributors to security. And a comment, because we're in Europe here, we're talking in Poland, I'm very tired of the Europeans when we talk about NATO, or Europe when we talk about NATO. There are individual countries that are doing their share and more. And there are countries that, quite frankly, are not doing even what they should be doing in the first place. And unfortunately, we don't have yet a clear understanding in Washington that we should be rewarding those countries that are willing to take the risks, that are willing to spend the money. And instead, we're still operating in this kind of legacy framework because what our alliance looked like traditionally, and we look at GDP sizes and we look at population resources, well, there's a temporal dimension to war. Geography matters, and the same will be true about the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, we are doing as much as we can, Andrew. Believe me. About the China, you know, I think that it is also the idea and initiative, the Road and Belt, and the new Silk Way, the idea. But in my opinion, very important, it is also that China Ocean Shipping own all harbor of Piraeus. And I think that if they will not fight with us, they will find another way, like trade. They will slowly buy harbors like Piraeus to create their point of trade in Europe. And they will find another way, not only typical military navies to be in Europe.
Yes, Ying-Yu, I mean, Taiwan is very much on the front line here in the Indo-Pacific. What would you like to see European countries do to improve the situation in terms of security in the Indo-Pacific?
The first I want to follow the saying the mainland China. Yes, the navy and their ship is very such powerful. But the first thing I want to point out is not only the PLA navy. Recently, they also using Coast Guard. There, the Coast Guard is below the PAP. That is still controlled by the CMC. So it will be part of the military system. It's not the police department. So sometimes they will be using the Coast Guard, try to driving near, not only near Taiwan, but for example, recently in the Philippines, in the Japan. So sometimes maybe in Taiwan's role, international role, we cannot direct to using the Navy cooperation. But in the Coast Guard side, Coast Guard, this department, maybe it will be more easily to cooperation. That is the first thing. And then the second, in the, mainland China, there the Navy is rising such grades, is too much, is rising very fast. But let us to the reminding in the 1819, the Yellow Sea Battle, Qing, the mainland China's navy is powerful than Japan, but finally Japan's fleet will win. Why they will be win? Sometimes it's not only how much you have, it's your technology, your strategy, and your command control system. That is, I think, the PLA Navy. They're the big problem about PLA. PLA, that is party's army, so party command the gun. As we know, recently the PLA, a lot of the top level, the general or the admiral, will be under arrest or is lost. Why it will be happen? Because maybe they will be not loyal by the Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping not trust them. So if the one country, if the military force, your general will be changed very fast, and they just to reset their the one that survives, the SSF, Strategy Support Force, is over. They renewed that to set the three the new department. It's still not yet military reform. In this time, PLA will be ready to fight. I think I'm still using the question mark.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to now open up a bit to the audience, and it's a bit difficult to see, but I can see a lot of people waving their hands. So I can see two people over here. Maybe the microphone could go over there. Maybe you would also tell us who you are when you stand up and ask your question.
Yes, Konstantin Agat. My question is to Andrew, and I would like you to focus on, well, basically the area where we are now. Much has been said about the Baltic Sea now becoming the NATO lake after the accession of Sweden and Finland. At the same time, you see Russia interfering with GPS signals over the Baltic. And now, 2 days ago, they said they're going to unilaterally readjust, quote-unquote, borders, sea demarcation lines. At the same time, we keep hearing that the Baltic Sea Fleet of Russia is ridiculous. Now, what would you propose? Does NATO have to do something about it in terms of demonstrating naval power, organizing major exercises, blanketing St. Petersburg with some kind of electronic lid for 5 minutes or something like that? What is your assessment of the situation, sea situation here?
Okay,
I will go back to, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to take one more question and then we can go to the panel. Yes, there's a lady, I think, over here in the middle.
Thank you, Charlotte. I have the question both to you, Lieutenant Commander, and for Andrew. The beginning of your presentations remind me the phrase that once I heard in the United Kingdom from one of the very famous think tanks. They said, our reputation is much better than what is the situation in reality. And can we really speak about the great sea power of some countries when the United Kingdom are now considering decommissioning few Navy ships because they cannot hire the crew? The US doesn't have any Navy presence in Alaska, and Turkey doesn't have any Navy bases on the Black Sea coast. So should we reconsider our naval posture, probably, both regionally and in terms of the priorities, if we really would like to speak about the great powers?
Okay, thank you. So there were two questions there. The first one, I think, focused on the Baltic region and what can NATO do or countries around the region to push back against Russia's posture. And then secondly, are we living on an outdated reputation? That is particularly the dominant naval powers within the NATO, I think, alliance. Who would like to go first?
Can I about Baltic? Come on, we are not the lake. Come on, Baltic is not the lake. I feel like we are doing. It's not that we are not doing everything. That all exercise or with all things which we are doing are for nothing. Look, last exercise, Mare Aperto 24. When we start the exercise, the Russian fleet just go away. And even it is only for the exercise, we see our strength. We see how to cooperate. We see how to understand each other procedures and things how we work. I will always say that train as you fight. So first you have to train, because otherwise you will not know how the situation will be. For me, it is very important that we are exercise, that we are talking, that we have meeting, that all create a good field for the cooperation in the worst situation.
I think we're not demonstrating decisively enough that this will not be tolerated. This is not just the Baltic, it's also the Black Sea. If you talk to the Romanians, the amount of jamming the Russians do, the driving, ships through their exclusive economic zone, and just the rest of it. Every single time when a missile flies into the airspace of a NATO country and there's no response, or the response is delayed, it raises the bar, that the actual moment of confrontation will be more expensive. So I would strongly encourage people to think in terms of making sure it's absolutely understood that the NATO fence is sacred. So far, he has respected it to some degree, but he is testing and probing all the time. To Julian's comment about how the Brits actually saved their hide because they started on the Spitfire platform and the radar and the rest of it early enough so that by the time the war started, those Spits were fully operational. Radar, that fighter jets and a number of other things, that saved them in the Battle of Britain and then allowed them to fight another day to defeat Nazi Germany. Everybody now is talking about buying new weapon systems. Finns are buying over 60, F-35s. The Poles over 30 some F-35s. The Romanians. The problem is production capacity. The same goes for the M1A2 SEP V3s that Poland is supposed to get, 250. Once everything is in line, this will be an incredibly potent force. But there's a temporal dimension to the conflict. If you look at the Russian force reconstitution, they're doing this much faster because they're pulling old post-Soviet stuff. So the delta between how quickly NATO can rearm and how quickly the Russians can actually, get to where they think they have an opportunity, that's the risk level for our military, for the regional plans and the rest of it. So the larger question we have to ask is our economic policy. If you listen, I'm back in Washington 8.5 months after 7 years in Europe. Most of the conversation that I hear about national security is reactive and it's normative. We're defending the rules-based international order, right? If I went to a farmer in Iowa and say, pay your taxes because you're defending the rules-based international order, what do you think he would say to me? What are you smoking, right? What are you talking about? I need to know what kind of a geostrategic outcome I want to achieve. I want the other guy to be on his heels. I want us to be leaning in and being proactive. I want to speak in terms of specific theaters that we have to secure, and then what kind of force posture do we need? To your question about are we living in our former glory, yes and no. The numerical aspect will be there for us. What I said at the very beginning, and this conversation, I even remember the Obama-Romney, debates, when Romney for the first time brought this up, saying, Mr. President, our Navy is smaller than at any time since 1918. You've endangered America's security. And then President Obama said, but these are extremely capable ships. They can fly to the moon, make ice cream, and do all sorts of things. But the truth is that even the most capable platform, if it is not deployed in the critical theater, makes no difference. So we need to, and the second point is this, we're supposed to go to war if China attacks Taiwan because it's in our national security documents that we will deter and, if need be, defeat that aggression against a country on whom we depend for 80% of our antibiotics, right? Where actually, if you look at steel imports, critical supply chains, manufacturing, you cannot go to war if you don't have a degree of autarky built into your system. And the same thing goes for the Europeans. When you look at lead times for ammunition production, for example, at Rheinmetall and the rest of it. And defense business is not charity. They will build if there is orders and purchases. And finally, we shut down so many production lines. Like if you look at the F-22, for example, when the Cold War ended, we never fulfilled the contracts that we're going to fulfill. Those engineers are now sitting in front of television sets, watching football and drooling. These are retirees. So it's not just clearing enough people to put them into the production process. It's actually getting that skill set and the ability to maintain and the rest of it. We're 2.5 years almost into this war. Since 2008, since Georgia, we should have been thinking about this. That was the 1934 for the Brits. 2008 should have been the wake-up call. 2014, 2015, Syria, finally the second invasion of Ukraine. Every single time the Russians used military power, they scored a geopolitical win and paid virtually no consequences for that, right? And Putin is no dummy. And then, of course, we had our less than glorious withdrawal from Afghanistan shortly before he decided to move into Ukraine. And I am sure he thought that he was going to get away with it one more time. So unless we grow up and understand there is no free lunch, this is what I tell Bridge Colby all the time. You know, if you start your strategic thinking about the Indo-Pacific based on the resources you have and not on the vital national interests that you have to secure, then this is not going to end well. And finally, leadership. Our leaders need to speak to our respective publics about what's at stake, what has to be done. I wrote recently a piece arguing that we need to restore national military service in the U.S. You should see how much hate I got on social media immediately. But then I talked to the guy who runs our selective service. We need to address reserves, trained pools of people. Where are we going to pull people from? Every service in the United States, except for the Marine Corps, had recruitment shortfalls, including the Navy, including the Army, including the Air Force. The Air Force was fudging the numbers a little bit.
We are now down to the last 30 seconds, and I'm told that we have to finish because otherwise you will not be able to have your lunch. So I just like to say in the final few seconds that I hope very much that this has been of interest, that the naval domain, the maritime domain matters and will continue to matter. And I hope we can agree that given the successes that we've had in the past, and the way in which the sea powers, the maritime states, have prevailed against their terrestrial adversaries, that we can maintain an upbeat stance and think and hope at least and take the necessary actions that we need to take to ensure that we prevail and win in the future, not only in relation to helping Ukraine, but also in seeing down our revisionist competitors, whether Russia in the Euro-Atlantic or China and others in the Indo-Pacific. So thank you to the panel.
Yeah, just one thing to add in the naval, we don't say well done, we say bravo Zulu, so bravo Zulu for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James, thank you so much for moderating this panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I want to pick up on that point that Andrew Michta made at the beginning of the conversation, that although we have experimented for a while, politically or intellectually, with having an either-or approach, it appears to be a false choice. And in fact, we have a growing connectivity of these two theaters, Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic. And my question to you is how to connect better the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific theaters. Are we able to do this, and do we want to do this?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think it's also solved to some extent because in the UK's integrated review refresh of last year, the UK dispensed with the idea of two separate theatres and said that the two theatres are merging into one, an Atlantic-Pacific. Not only are Europeans and Americans going to the Indo-Pacific, but countries in the Indo-Pacific, such as China, through their Belt and Road initiatives, Global Security Initiative, and so on, are coming to the Euro-Atlantic. And we can also see that through the support that countries like Japan and Australia have provided to Ukraine. Those countries have provided more significant assistance than some relatively large European countries. So this shows the connectivity of the two regions. And we can do more in that regard to bind them together, both intellectually but also in terms of substance.
James, thank you very much for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.